Welcome everyone to episode 12 of the MEE-FIT podcast. This is the first time we've got an external speaker involved, which we're very excited about. So yeah, we're gonna dive in if that's okay. We've got Sam here from a charity organisation known as Men Who Talk, who we've just brought in to deliver a workshop yeah. For our clients here at MEE-FIT on all things men's mental health, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and I know a lot of the guys who attended seem to really enjoy it as well. So yeah, Sam, if you don't mind, just introduce yourself a little bit sort of about yourself and a bit more about Men Who Talk.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Sam. I'm the founder and director of Men Who Talk. It's a men's mental health charity really designed to kind of champion conversation between men. Our hope, our aim is to try and create that kind of supportive social space for men before there's any kind of crisis. We really recognise that there's a real focus at the moment on suicide prevention, on people who are in a state of really needing a lot of extreme support, and that's really important. I'm not taking away from that at all, but Men Who Talk is an opportunity to try and put something at the beginning, something earlier on, to say, okay, well, we've got some services where men are in crisis and they can get support. What can we do? What can they have kind of earlier on? So we run weekly online groups for men to access. We've recently started a weekend group, so that's in its infancy and starting up. And as I said, they're social spaces for men to come and connect. We have a team of facilitators who are amazing. They help make sure that the space is safe and supportive, judgment-free, and to also help us kind of navigate and manage any conversations that might be challenging. We're not afraid of difficult conversations, but it's important that, you know, when you're running a group, you have to be aware of the whole group, not just the individual. So we don't want people to leave the group feeling worse, feeling kind of like we've not done our job. So our facilitators are there to kind of help navigate everybody through that. In addition to that, as you've already referenced, we run workshops for organisations, and that's an opportunity for us to talk about kind of mental health and start the conversation on men's mental health, which is a growing topic, and that's really positive to see, but there's still a huge amount of work to do and a huge space for that. We also work with universities to kind of help empower the next generation of mental health professionals, and to also recognise that university students in particular are really struggling with their mental health and well-being. And again, if we can look at the average student population, the kind of 18 to 25 age bracket, if we can engage with them now when they're young and talk to them about mental health and well-being, especially the men, then that potentially sets them up for a lifetime of being able to engage with services and talk about their health and well-being, which, you know, might not help everybody, but it's just another way that we can kind of maybe address some of the issues that men in particular are facing. So yeah.
Love that. So what led you into this path?
That's a great question. There's lots of different things. I think professionally, for the maybe slightly more boring answer, the boring part of the answer, professionally I've always been interested in kind of specific mental health related issues. My background is working in mental health. And as a man who has experienced challenges with their mental health and well-being, I've always felt that there was something I wanted to do in that space. I never really knew what it looked like until I knew. As with everything, you don't really know until you know. But Men Who Talk seemed like a kind of organic process of looking at an issue and thinking, what is the easiest way that I could try and solve that issue without needing millions of pounds of funding, without needing anything that's really complicated. And that's when I settled on the kind of the power of chatting and talking. I think from a personal level, I've been frustrated in the past at the type of support that's available, the way in which we're talking about mental health, especially men's mental health. It's great to hear that people are starting to talk about preventative measures in mental health, but that's so far from the reality of what the NHS is currently dealing with, of what a lot of other charities are dealing with at the moment. And that's really difficult because as someone who has found challenges with their mental health and well-being, but maybe isn't suicidal, I've always felt like I've slotted into a grey area that has been challenging to navigate. Do I need therapy? Do I need counselling? Do I need a space to chat? And actually not being able to find that space or kind of think about how I could access that space really led me to think, well, if I can't find it, I'll create it. And, you know, Men Who Talk kind of naturally flourished from that space. So there's kind of two different halves to my reasoning, to be honest, and they both argue with each other often, and create different, reasons for where we're going and the directions that we're at, and also the journey that we've been on as an organisation as well.
It's interesting you mentioned about the preventing people getting to that end point. It's funny, where we were doing another podcast episode earlier this week, and we were speaking about that from a fitness perspective, and how people, a lot of clients we've worked with have almost neglected their health and fitness up until a point that something seriously happens to them, or they see something serious happen to a friend or a relative or someone who they know, and that's what is then the catalyst for them to do something about their own physical health. So I suppose in a lot of ways mental health might be the same for some people, that they maybe leave it until, not that it's too late, but they leave it until that end point, and you're, I suppose, trying to slot in before that. Very much like what we do here. Prevention is, better than a cure, like they say.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I think it's very admirable, that people create organisations after a difficult challenge. If they've lost somebody to whatever issue, to whatever cause, it is always admirable. But I get really frustrated that we seem to be in a moment where we have to wait until someone's taken their life before we create an organisation to stop them from taking their life. And the amount of wastage. And I'm sure if you go to any of the people, who've set up organisations after the loss of somebody and ask them, what would you prefer, the successful organisation that you've got now or the person back, they'd say the person back every single time. So I'm very fortunate. I'm in the rare few where I don't have a personal story of suicide. And I count that as an enormous blessing, but I also count that as a huge challenge to try and maintain that. It's no good just expecting people who've been through that trauma, who've been through that loss, to place all the burden on their shoulders. It should be the other way around. I should be taking on that, and people who haven't had that experience to say, enough, we don't want any more, we don't want any more of this. And it's really important to be able to try and think of that as a motivation. On our website, one of the key things that we've put in big letters is our mission is not born out of tragedy, but the passionate desire to avoid it. And that's for me, it's a really simple way of thinking about it, because, it is so common with mental health and poor mental health that, as you've said, unless you've experienced it or you've seen other people, there's just not the understanding. And that speaks to the education system. It speaks to what's available at the moment, in terms of support. And it speaks to the narrative that, a lot of these organisations, where they've been created because they've lost somebody, obviously the narrative is around that loss. And sometimes I think we risk slipping into the space of feeling like you can only access it if you've got that personal experience, if you've got that loss. One of the great things about coming to the gym and about looking at preventative mental health care is we've started to see through our marketing, through engaging with people on this level, is that we're starting to see guys coming along who are saying, actually, I'm feeling all right, I'm feeling positive, I want to now carry that on, I want to feel even better. And that mindset change, and that's the space I want to get into. That's where I want Men Who Talk to be going, and the whole sector in general to be going, because then, we're really creating that openness, that positivity around saying, well, you're feeling great now, how can we build some resilience for when you're not feeling great, or when you might be feeling a challenge? And it's sowing that seed early on, to be able to have that. It's difficult because it's not what we've been told, it's not what we've been taught, and it's a very, very different way of thinking, which requires a whole kind of root and stem change of the whole kind of way of thinking about mental health. But I think it's important, if we're ever going to talk about, what's often talked about, kind of stopping suicide prevention, we can't say we want to prevent suicide without thinking, how do we start? How do we begin that right from the beginning? How do we start from that process?
So you mentioned, obviously, whenever mental health comes up, the big word of suicide will obviously be a big part of the conversation. And for anyone who's listening who maybe, we just in the workshop you just delivered, spoke a lot about stigma and especially around men's mental health. I mean, would you be happy to just share some of the, not that you need to know all the facts and figures off the top of your head, but just, set the scene on what's going on from a men's mental health perspective. For anyone who's listening who might think, men's mental health, don't need to worry about that, or, that type of thought process.
Yeah, I mean, to go for the jugular, the big one, the yearly statistics, around 6,500 people die by suicide in the UK every year. We know that around 75% of those are male. I think it equates to roughly one person every 2 hours. One man every 2 hours takes their life in the UK, which to me is staggering. It's such a huge level. But something that I think and I'm particularly keen about, is that's just one statistic. Those are the people who've died by suicide. The number of people who then make suicidal attempts, have suicidal ideation, who reach crisis point, who struggle, is then 10, 20, 100 times more than that. It's almost unknown as a statistic. What we do know as a stat and as a reality is that despite the fact that men as a majority are reaching crisis point with their mental health and well-being, they're not reaching out to or engaging with services at a lower level, the therapy, the counselling. Around 36% of referrals for NHS talking therapies each year are for men. So we're seeing a huge disconnect between the reality of crisis and men accessing those services. Now, the conversation often is that that's the men's fault, not the services. I think that's completely wrong. I think that's the wrong way of looking at it. And, something we brought up in the workshop, which is really important, is as an organisation, as Men Who Talk, we don't say men don't engage. We say we need to be more engaging. And thinking about how we change that mindset, how we put that reality, is again one of the only ways that I think we can really create things that men are going to want to engage in. But it is the stark reality is that what we have right now, men are not accessing it. Men are not wanting to go and engage with that.
Why do you think that is? What's your understanding of what are I know we spent, again, talking about the workshop, we spent a bit of time talking about the barriers that people face. What's your perspective on that, having worked with a lot of people?
Yeah, I think it's the type of service that's available. That's a big one. Most people, male, female, when they're accessing support, it's one or two opportunities. You don't have a huge amount of time to engage with them. So if it's a service that they don't like or that's not useful, you risk not only putting them off from engaging with that, but then you risk permanently disengaging them. So something that we've seen is men who have reached out, they have started counselling, they've started CBT, but they've been pigeonholed into something that they don't want because it's the only thing that's available, or it's the first thing they've come through. They've gone through the process of quite often complex assessments, which can be traumatizing in themselves because you're digging up a lot of information, and going through that process of discussing intimate topics with a stranger to then find a therapy that's not particularly beneficial. You're potentially opening the can of worms, and then realizing that you can't put the lid back on. And for a lot of men, that also then feeds into the fear element of, it's easier for me to try and manage it with the lid on and pretend like it's not there sometimes, than to risk going into a service that I might not like or I might not enjoy, and then have the lid open and no way of closing it back down again. So those, I think, are some of the bigger reasons as to why men in particular are not accessing the services. The fear element is a huge one, and we've talked about stigma, the big boogeyman word, stigma, that's bandied about often. But stigma, cultural stigma, the kind of perceptions around men's mental health is still a huge barrier. We're told men don't cry, it's a sign of weakness. We have this hustle culture where we have to be relentlessly busy to be successful. We have to have a flash watch, we have to have a car, children, a successful big holiday every year, all of these things, and we have to post it all on social media all the time, and it's a relentless kind of battering. But it's fed from an undercurrent of centuries of that being told, to people that, these are the people that are successful. This is the aspiration, the life that you need to aspire to. And what we don't always necessarily realize is that places a huge amount of pressure on people, especially men, who then, feel like if they don't have a great job, if they don't work, 70 hours a week or whatever it is, they don't have a flash car, then they're not successful. So it's important for us to address what success looks like and to individualize success as well. My success might be very different to yours, and yours is probably different to mine, and that is very, very acceptable. That's a good thing. But it's really important to be able to recognize that and bring that into the conversation, because otherwise we risk this big homogenous blob of stigma and not understanding it, but then it having this really significant impact on why men are not accessing support for their well-being. So there's lots of different issues, and it goes on a really granular level of individual reasons why you wouldn't access it, but on the broader stereotypical level, those are some of the big issues that we see men facing on a regular basis. And what I find probably sad is that men are really, certainly the men that I've spoken to, are really trying to address that. They're trying really hard to work on themselves, and they're quite often feeling so beaten down by the world that it's a lot of hopelessness. And it's, for me, quite an emotional element of the groups that we're not doing anything fancy. We're running spaces that are social, that are supportive. Our facilitators help just create an environment where people don't feel judged. It doesn't cost us millions and millions of pounds. It's not a huge, great big intervention that took years to design. We're just providing a space to chat. But the difference for those men coming into the groups and feeling that, and feeling like possibly for the first time they're not being judged, they're not being hounded, there's not a pressure, there's no stigma, is heartening, but also I find really difficult. I find it upsetting, because I think it should just be a standard, and I get frustrated when it's not the standard. Maybe I set up unrealistic expectations for the world, but I think it is sad and a shame to see that many men, even who are trying to engage in their mental health and well-being, are so often being put off by lots of different things that are so, in my opinion, easily addressed and should have been addressed.
What sort of things are you referring to there? So do you mean things like their own friendship circles, their family, their workplace?
Yeah, bit of all. Yeah. Bit of all that, to be honest. The way in which we talk about mental health and well-being, the way in which we address specific issues, the way in which things are funded. I know that funding is a complex thing, and it's, the F word frightens everybody. But for me, I don't understand how not just organisations like Men Who Talk, but Andy's Man Club, Talk Club, how these relatively simple organisations haven't been flooded with funding, because they're doing a critically important job to stop people reaching the point where it's costing billions of pounds to create these complex interventions. So maybe that's me again being a bit unrealistic, shaking my fist at the sky, but I don't understand how we have all of this awareness days, we have all these conversations online, we have every hashtag you can possibly think of, but it's not matching up with the reality of what's available and what is being talked about. And that creates that void where men feel underrepresented, they feel beaten down, they feel like there's services that don't care, or that, it's too much of a risk to talk about their mental health and well-being, because the off chance is that they'll be left or abandoned or whatever, and that's really difficult.
I understand the frustrations though. Like, we have, coming at from a slightly different angle, we have a similar thing within the fitness industry. We see, if you look at the rates of people who are overweight and the burden that places on the NHS and how preventable that can be, and not even just overweight, but just physically unhealthy, poor nutrition, poor lifestyle. We know all these things that could be done to help that, but like gyms like ours, there's a network that we're involved in that are always championing for things like business rates to be taken off gyms and VAT to be taken off fitness services to make it more affordable for people, to make it more accessible to people, but it just doesn't seem to want to happen. But it's a similar frustration. You're seeing how beneficial something that you're doing could be for more people, and you're trying your best to make it accessible, but it's a similar frustration.
Yeah, and I quite often joke with the Men Who Talk team and people that I'm around. I feel like I've stumbled across like something magic, and I feel like almost like I've cheated the world by like finding this thing that seems to work. And a big fear almost when I first started Men Who Talk was like, I used to think that we'd be made redundant really quickly as an organisation, that we would lose our kind of need, because I thought surely a bigger player like the NHS is going to come along and they're going to fund a programme like this. But internally on a massive scale. So I thought, we'll have some groups for a little while and then somebody will pick up and it'll go from there. And it's not happening. And I'm like, I feel like it's a huge missed opportunity. And I've said very openly to plenty of people, in lots of different organizations, that this is such an easy fix compared to the level of challenge and the risk of not doing anything. I mentioned a stat before to you guys. For every pound that a company invests in positive mental health programs, whatever that might be, they see on average around £5 return on investment. So if you went to any company and said, I've got a product that's going to earn you 5 times the cost, 5 times the profit, that company would get funded within an instant. If you went on Dragon's Den, that's it. Bang, you've got your product is made. And because it's mental health and because it's the charity sector, we have this aversion to seeing it in the same way. And that's a big part of charities not selling themselves particularly well, historically not talking about the finances because they get all a bit worried. Fear of the competition, of people kind of taking the idea. But if I wake up tomorrow and read that the NHS has funded a full programme of early intervention, preventative mental health programs for men, and that makes us redundant, that will be the greatest email I will ever read, because that's the ambition. When you set up a charity, whatever it might be, the end goal should always be to close yourself down, to do your job so well that you close. That's the point of charity, is to fix a need, to see a space and to fill that space, and then eventually it no longer be a space. The reality is that most charities never see that day, and that's sad. But I think to then create an insular feeling and a way of looking at things to say, well, we need to be the one to get the contract, we need to be the one to race to the bottom to offer the best deals so that the funders come to us, it's rotten. It's not the best way to run the sector, and it's created an environment where we're only funding things that are very, very specifically evidence-based. They're only very specific within metrics, and that means that a lot has been lost. And this has not just happened over a couple of years. This is decades of kind of just falling into that trap of going into that space. Funders are responsible for it. Charities are responsible for it. Government's responsible. We've all played a part collectively, but I want to have Men Who Talk and to be working in the sector to try and say, we need to change this. We need to think differently about how we're doing these programs, because otherwise we are losing men that shouldn't have been lost. And we have to apologise to every family and every friend that is going through that, because we've taken something that we know works and we've chosen not to do it on the scale and the ambition that we should do it. So that's the frustration, but the responsibility. I think that's a massive driver for all of us at Men Who Talk. We're very passionate about it, because you have to be passionate about this sort of work, because there are big changes that need to be made, and they're bigger than what we can do realistically on our own. So we have to be ambitious and passionate enough to bring other people on board and bring other people on the journey. The workshops like the one today at the gym is a key part of that, of being able to bring people on the conversation. That's 10, 15, 20, 30 people who are then going to go out, start talking about men's mental health, start thinking about men's mental health, and there's untold impacts of those conversations, what that might then bring up. There's direct things that you might be able to do in the gym, in the near future or the long future. But the fact that those people then go away and start talking about that, take it into their workplace, their home life, whatever it might be, that's where the change really starts to happen over a longer period of time.
Nice. So I'm going to try and bring it just back into a fitness context a little bit, if you don't mind. Just, we do a lot of work here, and I think something that bugs me a little bit, shooting myself in the foot here a little bit from a fitness perspective, but you see online, people talking about exercise and you don't need depression medication, you just need to go to the gym, and that type of thing. Making out exercise is the miracle cure to depression and mental health illnesses, which I don't think it is, but I do think it plays a key role. So where do you see that fitting in? Where does exercise and physical activity fit into helping someone with a mental health issue, or helping people generally with their mental health?
Yeah, I think it's a recognition that there's not a holy grail, of mental health or physical health. There's no one singular thing. I think if someone could create a magic pill that would solve the world's problems, they'd be a very rich person. Because that's the temptation and the frustration when we're talking about mental health for a lot of men in particular comes from the fact that it is hard work and it's lots of different things. It's not a quick fix. I think when we're looking at the benefits of physical activity and working on your mental health, it's important to keep that in mind, to keep the fact that it's lots of different things. One of the conversations that was had in the workshop with one of the groups of guys was around the fact that their support networks can change, and that can present a really significant barrier to kind of promoting positive kind of mental health and well-being. And that's really important for physical health as well. I think, what set of exercises or what might work, what a class that might be really beneficial one week might not necessarily be beneficial the next week. That doesn't mean that it's not a good class or a good set of exercises. It's just that you have to be flexible to mold around that. I'd always say with mental health, medication is an option, therapy is an option, talking groups, walking groups, they're an option, physical health is an option. There's so many different things, but it's about finding the right balance and the right kind of coordination. I definitely know that physical activity and being physically healthy has a huge impact on your mental health and your well-being. Gyms provide social spaces for people to connect, for people to challenge each other. They set a level of expectation. You have to turn up, you have to physically go. And certainly when you're looking at kind of depression and anxiety, that can be really beneficial for people coming into the spaces to have that expectation. If you know that your friend is going to be there waiting to train with you, it might just help as a motivator to get you out of bed or get you into the mindset to come and train. There's the physical elements of hormone release, stress relievers, and the fact that having a healthier heart rate, better blood pressure, things like that will also help with your mental health and well-being. But it's about balancing the two. They work so closely together. There's a temptation sometimes, as you said, to say, oh, well, the gym will fix it. And that might well be the case, but maybe sit and ask yourself, why is the gym fixing it? And it won't just be because you managed to bench press your personal best. It's the feeling that bench pressing your personal best has given you. It's that satisfaction. It's that boost of self-esteem. It's that, I've achieved a challenge. And if you can take that and replicate that elsewhere, so in your workplace, take that feeling of, actually, when I achieve a challenge, I get that rush, I get that positive element. So maybe I'm going to set myself a few achievable challenges in work. It's the temptation sometimes to just see them as like an isolated thing and not to go deeper into why is that? Why is it beneficial to me? What am I actually getting out of it beyond the physical element of being able to look at myself in the mirror with a six-pack or whatever it is, with those elements? What's the genuine purposeful benefit? And then how can I replicate that across other areas of my life? How can I, instill those values and those enjoyments and that pleasure across different areas of my life? But it is really important to notice how interlinked physical and mental health is. And, when we're talking about Men Who Talk and increasing access to services, one of the elements of running online spaces is we have guys coming to us who aren't able to access in-person services. So looking from a physical health perspective, we've had people with long-term conditions or people who've been waiting for operations or things. And so physical health is a real challenge for them. But if we can help boost their well-being and give some confidence, give some trust, some sort of boost to their self-esteem, that might well provide the opportunity for them to go, okay, well, I can't go for a really long walk like I used to, or I can't go to the gym, but maybe I can walk to the end of my garden and stand at the wall and talk to people for 5 minutes. And maybe that might be the first time that they've left the house for a week. And that little bit of exercise, that brief moment, might well just do a bit of benefit. And then that might motivate them to say, okay, well, yesterday I went to the garden wall and I stayed there for 10 minutes. Maybe I can stay there standing for 20 minutes. And then it might be, could I maybe make it down to the shop, or these sorts of things. And it's amazing how organically these things can grow. But yeah, they're so interlinked, and it is so important to have an awareness that it's never a one size fits all. It's never a one quick fix. It always has to be a combination of lots of different things. Diet as well, that's a huge element. Eating well, not just for your physical health. You can do as well as you want in a gym session, and then you can go and unpick it all afterwards by having a poor diet.
Yeah.
We know that.
And you feel terrible when you do that as well.
Yeah.
Like often people do, they'll say that to us, that they don't feel good coming off the back of an indulgent weekend. They've enjoyed it, but they don't feel great for it. There's probably things to work on there mentally for some people in terms of their relationship with food as well. That's another conversation for another day. But I think generally speaking, like you said, if people are eating well, looking after themselves physically, it's going to help. But I think, highlighting what I said before, like it's not the magic bullet that people can sometimes portray it to be. Fitness professionals, are guilty of that, and it's a frustration, because I think we've seen it here where people come in, yes, they feel better for it, but then for some reason they just can't get here.
Yeah.
And it's not as simple as just saying just get yourself here. Like there's obviously something going on that's stopping them mentally or physically, and that's obviously a problem that needs something else. It's not just a case of get yourself to the gym because they can't,
Yeah, and then you also, as with mental health, there's a huge amount of potential for damage to be done actually in that space. It's a finer boundary than I think most people understand. There's coming to the gym because you feel the benefits of it, and then there's coming to the gym because you're obsessed. There's an obsessive nature of exercise, and it can be an obsessive thing. It can be an addictive thing, because you get the rush, you get the positivity of it, you get the physical element of looking better, you get people complimenting you potentially, and that can really feed into it. There's a great program, I think on Channel 4, with one of the Made in Chelsea guys, who talked about his body's dysmorphia, and he's very muscular, and he talks about in this program his obsession with his muscles and how that's really fed into a massively negative spiral for him. So there's a huge, just like with the hustle culture, there's a huge potential for the fitness world to do a massive amount of damage. I mean, we talk about steroid use and substance misuse, which is a huge, plague and issue for the fitness world. But again, there's underlying mental health, well-being elements of that, body dysmorphia, body image related issues, eating disorders in men are still very much not talked about. And they are issues that lots of men face. If you're, by like a definition base, if you become obsessive with the gym and to the point that you're physically hurting yourself, is that an act of self-harm? And it might not be the conventional method of self-harming, but you are harming yourself on a level of conscious or subconscious, because you're putting yourself constantly in a situation where you're physically going to be unwell. And these are big things that we have to address. As with everything, it seems that the pendulum starts to swing and it swings massively too far in the wrong direction. And the kind of evolution of the fitness influencer and the kind of push towards health and well-being hasn't had a massive impact on the number of people that are registered obese. Obesity levels are going up. So it's not been a magic thing that's like solved the crisis of obesity and poor fitness levels. What it's done in my opinion, is created a potential area that's festering within itself, that's creating this like obsessed drive.
There is some research on that actually. It's emerging, as with you mentioned about before, about the issues people face getting the right research done, but there's definitely a lot more being done on things like Fitspiration as a hashtag, and how that has generally speaking has a net negative effect for most people. You know, it makes them feel worse about themselves. It puts undue pressure on them to look a certain way, to feel a certain way, to be able to do certain things within the gym. So yeah, I think as with everything in life, fitness has to be balanced. It has to be the right amount at the right time for the right person. And I think, like you said, social media certainly plays into that obsessive nature that people can. We don't deal with it a lot here, but I'm aware of it from my wider fitness interests, that, you know, things like diet culture, it's something you've come across, like how that can be very negative on, you know, and there's a big push at the moment from a few fitness influencers that I follow who are very positive, who talk about that, and how, you know, simple things like, if you comment on someone's weight loss, you know, oh, you look great or whatever, but you don't know you shouldn't not attach too much to that, because you don't know how that person's achieved that weight loss. They might have starved themselves, they might be feeling really down, they're not eating, they've had something bad happen to them, they've got an illness, you know, something negative might have happened for them to achieve that. But then when they get that comment of, oh, you look great, you know, you're also, it can feed into that, you know.
With that, you're also implying that they didn't look great before. So you're feeding into that potential obsession of, I didn't look good before, so now I look good in their eyes, so now I need to carry on doing more of what I did before. So it is one of those languages, one of my favorite things.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it?
Obsessed on the way in which we talk about things. But it's true how much the kind of broad language, you know, some psychologists have kind of recommended switching to, instead of you looking good, like commenting on the fact that they look well or look rested or things like that, because those are things that are healthier kind of connotations, healthier obsessions almost. It's good to want to look well, but again, you've also got cosmetics who feed into that massively and push products that, you know, will make your face look firmer, or, you know, trends that I'm old enough to have remembered, the sort of like Kylie Jenner challenge of, you know, sucking on the glass, and that for some people who did it too extreme caused like damage to their lips and things like that. So there's always a darker side. There's a little shadow that goes, you know, near. I would say with physical health and mental health, with anything where you're looking at it from the benefits, my encouragement is always to think, am I placing too many eggs in one basket? Am I placing too much of my reliance on one particular thing? And if you're honest with yourself and the answer is yes, then look at other things that you can do. Because if you then accidentally injure yourself, or you get involved in a car accident, or whatever the world might throw at you, and you can't go and train, but you've made that your entire support network, your entire way of looking after yourself, your world's going to shatter pretty quickly. And something that we see with mental health and you know, people who are newer to the mental health space, is that they're finding that previous things that worked are no longer accessible to them, or, you know, are not working to the same degree. So again, it's finding the right level of things, finding lots of different things, you know, going and being physically active, engaging in the gym, but then also going to, you know, social clubs, or going to walk and talks, or online groups, or taking medication, going to therapy, whatever it might look like, having a few different things, so that if you get that injury and you're told don't go to the gym for 6 months whilst you heal, actually you will naturally feel lower, obviously, because you've had one thing taken away. But then you've got other things that you can fall back on. And likewise, if for whatever reason the medication stops being as effective, or something else happens, you experience something really traumatic, again, you've got the gym that you can fall back on, and counselling and things like that. So it's, you know, it's not a great sales pitch, and you know, it's not going to earn anybody lots of followers, because the temptation, the way that the success has come from influencing in the online world is by creating the false image that one thing is successful. And that's across the whole board, that one way of beauty is beautiful, that wearing a full face of makeup makes you beautiful, that taking Ozempic is what's going to make you thin, that going to the gym and having ripped muscles is going to make you popular with the ladies, all of these, and that going to counselling or therapy is better because medication is like big pharma. All these sorts of things. It's sold on this is my one thing because I want to push this thing, because it's not being cynical. It's what I'm earning money from. It's where my success is coming from. But that's not the reality of what is successful. In reality, it's lots of different things and lots of different things for individuals, not just kind of looking at what works for groups.
Yeah. I think that's important though. Like, we always here we try and be balanced on everything, not get too stigmatized or dogmatized to a certain methodology or a certain approach or a certain thing. And that's what I think the online fitness community is guilty for a lot of the time, is being so dogmatic about this is the best thing for everybody, regardless of preferences, goals, situation that you find yourselves in, etc. So I think it's good. We've always strived to be balanced and understand that different things are right for different people at different times. One thing I did want to bring up before we probably bring towards a close, when you had the slide on the board about physical activity, the one part of it I really liked that you included was the social interaction that brings, because also here as a gym of MEE-FIT, like, yes, we're all about fitness, we're all about getting stronger, getting fitter, getting healthier, but a big part of what we do is also the community side of it, and we view that as a really important part of what keeps people here, what makes us what we are, is the fact that people come in, they know the trainers, they know the other clients, they form friendships potentially, they do extracurricular activities like come to a men's mental health workshop. Where do you see that fitting in? How important do you feel that is, having the right people around you, having a community of people that you can, that you vibe with, if you like?
I mean, it's like critically important. It's a really, and we're all experts really by lived experience in this area, mostly because we've all experienced COVID, which was a massive immediate severance of our connectedness in the conventional way. Gyms were closed, garden centres were closed. That had a huge impact on, in particular, those who are elderly. Churches were closed. So again, looking at how a massive worldwide thing impacted people's mental health and well-being, what was reassuring and what has proved to be one of the silver linings of what was a very dark cloud is the fact that then nurtured people to connect in different ways and to encourage people to connect in different ways. And the digital switch, people moving online, was hugely important. Zoom became a thing that everybody all of a sudden knew about. This company that had been going for years, all of a sudden magically, like, everybody was doing it. Everybody was doing their weekly family quizzes, things like that.
We did them here as a gym. We had to lean on that so heavily.
Exactly.
So heavily. And thankfully for us, it meant that we could navigate, without boring you too much with the details, but we just signed the lease to this place here from a smaller unit in the February, and then in the March we went into lockdown. So we had to keep things going as best as we could, and obviously had to lean on that so much. So it was a very vital time.
And it's the transition between being a company or a charity and being a community, and looking at community in the truest sense of the word, which is groups of people connecting with each other and socializing and being with each other through thick and thin, through the good things, through the challenging things. And it is really important. The ways in which we connect are so different now and so varied, and that's magical. That's great. It is, for me, amazing that I can jump on Zoom calls with people across the globe and connect with them. I can stay in touch and have that interaction. And likewise, I can go down the pub or go to the gym and I can have those in-person connections. Everything serves a different purpose. And I go through phases of personally enjoying different levels. Sometimes my social battery is just on the floor, so going out with friends is a real challenge, whereas then having a phone call where I'm in the comfort of my own home and I'm interacting or being on FaceTime, whatever it might be, then that suits that particular need. But feeling connected is really important. Loneliness and isolation is one of the key drivers of poor mental health in the UK, and it again speaks to a certain potentially lack of understanding around kind of mental health and well-being and loneliness. People often think that experiencing loneliness means that you're alone, but you can be lonely in a crowded room. You can be around a group of people and feel alone, and that awareness of that is really important, because we have lots of guys who come to Men Who Talk, and they will say they've got families, they've got friends, but they feel alone in their struggle because they can't talk to anybody specifically about those issues or specifically about these particular things. So they're feeling alone or lonely, but they're not physically alone.
Yeah.
So, that connection, genuine, meaningful connectedness is really important. And again, for them, we're not satisfying a need of a relationship or an in-person friendship group. We're satisfying the need of a space for them to come and talk about intimate challenges that they might not talk to others, or to feel connected or in a space where they can listen to other people being honest about their own well-being. I would still always encourage them to go to the gym, go to the pub, go to wherever it is they are, and have those other connections, of course, and not to just focus on Men Who Talk, but being able to incorporate those different things and having an awareness that, you talk and interact with different people for different reasons. I talk to my work colleagues for my day job about very specific things and challenges that we face there, and I socialize with them and talk about that level. At Men Who Talk, I put a different hat on. I'm the founder and director, so have very different conversations and a different connection to the people that are there. I then have my friend group who, don't know me as either. They know me as Sam. And so I have different connections. That's the fun social, but also the emotional social sometimes element. And then family, who obviously, I'm fortunate they've been there from the beginning, so know the whole story. And it's important for me to maintain connections as much as possible with all of that variety, but having a sense of connectedness in a world that can feel increasingly isolated. Social media is a wonderful tool when it's used well, and it can provide connection on a global scale, but it can also, on the darker side of things, it can foster a feeling of isolation. If you go too secluded onto the online world, then you're not going to have meaningful in-person connections, and that can be challenging. So, I think, as with everything, as with all that we've talked about, it's about balancing it, but finding connectedness is such an incredibly important thing. And if we as organizations, as a gym, as a charity, can help create those spaces, then you're not going to necessarily see a financial benefit. You're not going to see it, I've invested X amount of time and it's had X amount of return, but you'll see, like we've seen with Men Who Talk, men come back on a week in, week out, because they're not just part of the charity, they're part of the community, and they feel part of that community. And from being here, I get that vibe at the gym. You have a community here that, all right, they pay a membership fee, they pay whatever, and there has to be an element of business model there, but it's the reason that they maintain that membership, the reason they keep coming, is not just the physical element, but it's that community connectedness. It's being there. And if you can foster that, if you can spend a little bit of time investing in it and nurturing it, then you've got people, committed for life. And if you look at all the brands that have done that, there was program ages ago about the way that M&S treats its employees, and that the way that they're really, really good to their employees, as far as I remember. It's meant that they have people working there for decades. They make an entire career out of working for a company. Now, as a young professional, I can't personally imagine spending the next 40 years in the same company. But there are people who've spent that time because the organization has invested in them, invested in that community, invested in connecting with them beyond just you're my employee. And we do have a risk at the moment where big money, big organizations, I call them kind of flash in the pan things, they rear up from nowhere, make a big splash, huge impact, but they don't invest in their people, they don't invest in the environment, the community, the connection, and they just have endless high staff turnover, but they're only looking at the profit margin. And yeah, you can look at the profit margin, but I would far rather run an organization that's less profitable but more enjoyable and more meaningful and has a greater impact. You know, I can't take the money with me when I'm dead. I'd rather have a legacy of having an organization, a company or product or whatever that has helped maintain a community, created that environment that people are going to be talking about it for decades after I'm gone. What an incredible thing to be able to have. So again, it's that mindset maybe change. It's not always possible because it's not the culture that we've got globally right now is not around fostering that. But I think if we can, it's not going to get you into the Forbes 100 in millionaire style, but it will create a community around you and a space that is going to forever remember you. And I'd far rather have 100 people around my bedside in a hospital when I'm struggling than, you know, and less money than 100 stacks of money around me, you know, those sorts of things.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. And I liked what you said there, that in fact you've picked that up already from being here, and that's a big thing. Like we don't market this because the unfortunate reality is for a fitness business, typically I'd say 9 times out of 10 people are coming for a result in terms of, which is completely justified. You know, they want to lose weight, they want to tone up, they want to get healthier, they want to improve their generally their physical well-being, sometimes mental well-being. But one thing we'll always talk about here is people typically stay in a gym like ours for the community, and that's something we talk about internally all the time. People come for the result, they stay for the community, because you know, there's only so far that sometimes people will get with their fitness. That's the reality for a lot of people that we work with, you know. But what keeps them coming back is the fact that they come in, they know the staff, they know the people around them, they enjoy the workouts. It's a part of their life that they enjoy, that keeps them fit, keeps them mentally well as well. So it's a big thing for us. Final thing I'm going to just ask you. I always generally try and end these with asking for a bit of a message. It's usually from a client who has been successful with us, but a slightly different question for you. You know, you work with a lot of men who suffer with you know, issues with their mental health, and we spoke earlier a lot about the stigma associated with that. What would be your message to someone maybe listening to this or who's going through a mental health challenge? What would your message be to them in terms of how to go about finding the right service or the right solution to help them with that problem?
Give it a try. Give it a go. I know that it can be really difficult to open up. I know that it can be challenging to access services, and especially accessing services that you don't then enjoy, because it can feel like a wasted investment, but it's never actually a waste. If you don't like CBT or EMDR or counselling, you're learning that that's not what you need. So then you're going to be better placed in the next conversation that you have to say, I've given this a try and it wasn't beneficial. Now, obviously, it's challenging because you're having to open yourself up. I would say something with Men Who Talk, that's why we're at the beginning, because we're not asking, we don't do an assessment. We ask 2 questions when you sign up. Why do you want to come to the group, and how did you hear about us? We don't then stop you from coming to the group. You may well then find that the group wasn't for you, but the point is you've invested a bit of time, you've come to the space. We've never had anyone, touch wood, thankfully, yet who's regretted that, because even when they haven't enjoyed that, it's not been a space for them, we then work hard to try and find a space that is for them. I have said earlier today, and I will always say, I don't really care if it's a Men Who Talk group, an Andy's Man Club, a talk club, a men's pie club, walking and talking, a UK men's sheds, whatever it is, so long as they're accessing something. But you don't know until you give it a try. Nobody knows what a Men Who Talk group is like until they've been to a Men Who Talk group. So whatever your previous experiences of groups, whatever your previous experience of mental health services, you can't put us under the same umbrella because we are different. We offer something different. Annie's Man Club offers something different. And so it's important to give it a try. It requires that investment, that time, those sorts of things. But it's worth it, because certainly if you come and access our service, we'll welcome you into the community, we'll welcome you into that space, we'll hopefully make you feel safe and supported. And then after that, like I said, if it's not something for you, we'll then try and help find something that is, because I want men to feel supported, but they have to give it a try. I can't force them into the space. Nobody can force anybody to work on their mental health. They just have to do it. They have to give it a try and give it a go. And if you're not willing to do that, then you can't say that there's not something for you. You can't say, realistically that no one wants to help or nothing like that, because it's there. It's there every week. Every week, Men Who Talk exists, and his Man Club, all these things. You have to be the one to reach out, though. So yeah, give it a try. That's what I would say.
Excellent. Well, we'll finish up there. I think we've kept enough of your time today, Sam. But do you want to just let anyone who's listening know where they can find out a little bit more about yourself and Men Who Talk?
Yeah, I mean, a quick Google search will hopefully land you in the right direction. It's menwhotalk.org is the website. We're on Instagram, Facebook, X, as Men Who Talk, so you can find us through there. It's got plenty of information about us, about myself, about the groups, and kind of all the stuff that we do. So yeah, we try and post as much as possible on social media, but the website's also very active as well. So yeah, menwhotalk.org, that's the place to go.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your time, Sam. Really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Cheers.